What's up, everybody, and welcome on into a new week and a new NBA strategy show with Greg Ehrenberg. I am Adam Kauffman. This can be the Did Anyone Else Go In Just Way Too Hard on the Toronto Raptors hour? Because that's the kind of night it was, with a very light slate. Unlike tonight, we've got 11 games in front of us that we will go one by one, break down all 22 teams and all the good stuff that we normally give you. But last night, Greg, was this those short slates? Do you like to just stay away, or do you have even more fun with those? Which way do you lean?
Well, it depends. Like yesterday, I was doing family stuff. I was watching college basketball games with my brother, so I couldn't tell you what happened in yesterday's games. I knew there was 4 basketball games being played yesterday, but I don't know who did well in DFS. I don't know what happened. I was just hanging out with my brothers, watching college basketball, and not to go too far off on another round. I know we're a little restricted for time here, 11 games late, but there's been this trend on Twitter where people just any basketball game they're watching, if there's a big favorite that gets down like by double digits, people just live bet the favorite every single time. That's a terrible betting strategy. People should stop doing that. Something I noticed last night, just everybody was tweeting about betting on one of the teams. I forget which one it was in one of the later college basketball games. Everybody's just like, oh my God, we have to bet on who was playing UCLA yesterday. Do you remember?
It was Alabama.
All right, so it was Alabama. Then like Alabama got down by 11. So everybody's like, oh my God, we have to live bet Alabama. It's like, why? Like we're just blindly bet teams because they're favored before the game and now they're losing by a lot. And I noticed that some people do a lot, and that's just not a long-term profitable betting strategy.
Well, I can tell you as far as DFS yesterday, just to give you kind of a big picture view of what yesterday looked like, I won all my head-to-heads with like 235 points. That's what kind of day it was in DFS. Just, especially on DraftKings, snowflakes galore. Not too many guys absolutely went off. I mean, you had OG Anunoby went crazy. Dennis Schroeder went crazy, but again, crazy for them. Like they both had right around 40 points. You had just Gary Trent was a disappointment. Van Vliet more or less met expectations. Most people went pretty hard on the Raptors with Kyle Lowry getting ruled out. Trae Young, he was fine. Siakam, he was fine. Baines, for anyone that mixed him in, or Birch for the Orlando after the big game that he had. Jamal Murray was a disappointment. Joker was fine. It was kind of just one of those days. But today, looking ahead, because like Greg said, we got 11 games to go through, so we will do that. And we say hello to all of you in the chat, by the way. Welcome in. Good to have you with us. Tonight with the 11 games in front of us, and as we know, a lot is going to change over the course of the next, whatever it is, 9 hours before lock. Guys are going to get ruled out. You're going to have value opportunities emerge. But in terms of the stars and what we do know right now, what's kind of interesting is going off of Alex Baker, our own Awesemo, his projections, and just looking at what guys are expected to do tonight. Obviously, you have Russell Westbrook and James Harden, Luka Doncic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Karl Anthony Towns, Bradley Beal, Julius Randle, among others who are at least expected to play tonight. We'll see how that plays out. But right now, none of them are really in awesome, like can't miss, must play, build around these guys spots. You almost have to go down to, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, Christian Wood, kind of that tier if you're to not include those in some of the names that I already mentioned. But how do you feel about it?
It's going to depend on injuries like most other slates. Bradley Beal's question will play. If he's out, then Russell Westbrook would see a pretty big boost and he'd become a really strong pay up option. As of now, my favorite guy to pay up for is James Harden. Even though Kyrie Irving's coming back he was away from the team due to a family matter. Still with Kevin Durant out. I mean, we've seen James Harden in general play really well this year in those kind of situations. So it's going to depend on injury news. Westbrook if Beal's out. If not, it's Harden for me right now. So definitely some variables at play.
What about, and knowing full well that, as much as that may or may not change, like you said, Beal impact on Westbrook, this next part could change dramatically. It's hard to even dive into it. But if you had to outline a couple of value plays that you like right now, who would they be?
It's going to totally depend on injury news. So I don't even want to say anybody this early in the day because especially here are the list of just key players that are going to be listed as questionable right now that we are going to be talking about as the show goes on. Julius Randle, Bradley Beal, Christian Wood, Steph Curry, Kyle Lowry, Lonzo Ball, Evan Fournier, questionable to make his debut with the Celtics. Those are just some of the more notable players who are currently questionable on the injury report. So there's so much value there that anybody I've mentioned now could be somebody who I'm not rostering later in the day. It could be, or I could just be on totally different guys. So it's just it's a slate where it looks like there's going to be a lot of value, but we're not going to know who those value plays are, possibly until 1 minute until lock. But hopefully at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time, when we get the latest edition of the NBA injury report right before lock, and also all more reason to follow at Awesemo_NBA, El Negro Loco on Twitter, because that's also a great spot to get all the latest news.
Those are the really fun moments when, Paul George is ruled out for dizziness and Steph Curry gets the tummy ache, and, those things come out at 59:30, and you're just stuck and you can't change anything, and you want to just send your lineups right to hell.
Yeah. And
really good, exciting times.
Yeah, I mean, those are certain things that we can't really do anything about, but there's so many guys who are listed as questionable on the injury report. There's definitely going to be some value at some point that opens up today.
All right, I want to tell you quickly before we do dive into all these games, let's talk about No House Advantage, our sponsor here, who has taken a different spin on daily fantasy sports by offering, of course, player prop contests across the NBA. MLB is right around the corner, starting later this week. NFL, PGA, all for cash prizes, folks. This exclusively peer-to-peer fantasy sports platform levels the playing field and makes it easier for you to win real cash as compared with traditional DFS sites. Now, best part is you can join for free today. You heard me right. Join for free today. Download the No House Advantage app and use promo code Awesemo to receive a match deposit bonus up to $20. Eligible for all users. Beat your friends, not the house, and win big with player props today. So like we said, we have got an 11-game slate. What do you say we begin with the very first one, 7 o'clock Eastern tip, the Pacers in Washington. So we'll go right into that game that you had talked about with obviously the question marks surrounding Bradley Beal and Russell Westbrook. But we'll begin on the Pacers side and looking at some of the options that exist for you right now. I mean, one might argue, barring changes, that Justin Holiday, who was obviously a serious pay down option, $4,400 on DraftKings, might be in the best spot in terms of just points per dollar. Clearly not in terms of his ceiling. I mean, that's going to be Domantas Sabonis, as it always is, or you can include Malcolm Brogdon in there as well. But for you, is this more of a either steer clear of this game, or at least this side of this game, or pay down?
It's a vastly different game on DraftKings, vastly different team on DraftKings than is on FanDuel. One thing that we've seen with the Pacers since Karis LeVert has come back is, or at least maybe not come back, but it is come back, but made his debut with the Pacers and saw his minutes restriction lifted, is he's taking away a little bit from Malcolm Brogdon. He's taking away a little bit from Domantas Sabonis. And they've been priced down for that on FanDuel. On DraftKings, they have not. So on DK, Sabonis is 9,600. I wouldn't want to roster him at that price. But on FanDuel, he's 8,800 and one of the stronger power forward options. Also on FanDuel, Malcolm Brogdon is 6,500. At 6,500, I think that Malcolm Brogdon is a pretty good point guard play in the mid-range, whereas on DraftKings, he's priced at 7,000. So there's a big price gap between these guys on FanDuel and DraftKings. So Brogdon and Sabonis, guys that are worth being the player pool on FanDuel, not as much on DraftKings. And then something else of note, you mentioned Justin Holiday. Doug McDermott is questionable to play. If McDermott is out, then I think that we probably see some more minutes go to Holiday. But if McDermott plays, then Holiday to me is just probably a fairly priced guy. The other thing to consider too is, like I said before, there's so many players that are listed as questionable on the injury report that Justin Holiday could be somebody who pops up in lineup builds when you're making lineups, 9 hours before the slate locks. However, once the slate actually gets going and we start to get guys ruled out, there's a chance that he's going to look like a much weaker value play because it'll just be better plays that open up at that point.
Theodore here in the YouTube chat is of the mind play Brogdon, LeVert, Turner, Holiday, basically any pacer with a pulse.
That seems a little aggressive to me. But here's the good news if you do that is that you'll be looking very good in your contest at 7:20 p.m. Eastern time, because that will be the only game playing.
Yeah, exactly. You'll just be dominating the field. It'll be wonderful. And smash that like button, folks. Hit the subscribe button as well on the Awesemo YouTube page. We appreciate y'all. These shows, they are live all throughout the day. Several of them coming at you. We'll give you the full schedule for today a little bit later on. And of course, they get archived. You can go back, revisit if you'd like to. And there's also the Awesemo Podcast Network available to you, where we have shows for every single sport that get archived there, wherever you find your podcast. So make sure you check all those out. But going to the other side of that game, you mentioned the big question mark surrounding Bradley Beal. At the moment, if Beal does play, he is projected by Alex to be in a good spot, about 5.5x value with almost 50 points projected. Clearly, if he doesn't play, like you said, it really opens up opportunity for Russell Westbrook. Probably, shoe in for a triple double and a 50 or 60 point fantasy night, because that seems to be the way that he responds. But other than that, as can't emphasize it enough, as we sit here right now and look at this, you also have Rui, you got Denny. After that, I probably wouldn't pay down for anybody, but I don't know. How do you feel about those kind of mid-tier to low guys on top of obviously the Beal Westbrook debate?
Yeah, so the big thing here is going to obviously be whether Bradley Beal plays or not. If he is out, then Russell Westbrook leads the Wizards with a 39.7% usage rate. That is massive. So Russell Westbrook would definitely be somebody that we want to roster at a pretty high clip if there's no Bradley Beal. Rui Hachimura is somebody else who has benefited when Bradley Beal's been off the court this year. Hachimura without Beal on the floor, 23.8% usage rate this year, and scores 33.3 at DraftKings points per 36 minutes. So in the mid-range, I'd be looking at Rui if Beal is ruled out. If Beal plays, then I don't think there's any real reason to roster Hachimura. And then Westbrook, also just to clarify, if Beal's out, not only does he get a big boost, but he would become my favorite pay-up option on the slate. So if Beal is in, then I wouldn't really have much interest in Beal going up against the Pacers. He's fairly expensive. A little bit cheaper on FanDuel than DraftKings, 8,800 on FanDuel to 9,100 on DraftKings. But still, I think there's going to be other guys I would rather pay up for than Beal, especially because there are so many guys that are listed as questionable on the injury report that I assume it's going to set up as being a stars and scrubs type slate. So I don't really want to get to Beal. I don't think at like 9,100 on DraftKings when I could pay up an extra 15 or 1,600 and get to the next level of stars and rush somebody like a Luka Doncic or James Harden. So Beal's probably not going to be a priority play for me. And then other cheap guys on the Wizards like Len, Denny, Neto, just there's going to be better plays on the slate. There's going to be no reason to target them.
All right, let's take a look at the next tier of this slate, so to speak, and that's at 7:30 Eastern. We got a few games, and New Orleans and Boston. That is in Boston, in front of fans, by the way, for the first time for the Celtics at the Garden, albeit just a couple thousand of them. So maybe that provides a little bit of a boost if you're into that narrative on the Celtics side. But obviously, we begin with the Pelicans, the road team here. Zion Williamson, he's always a beast in stature. He was a beast on the floor the other day, absolutely dominant in closing out that game for Nolans here. But from a fantasy perspective, Greg, as you look at what guys are projected to do tonight, and obviously there is Zion, there's Brandon Ingram, but and Lonzo right now, I don't think we expect to see out there, but we'll see. You can expand on that. Even Steven Adams, Eric Bledsoe, you just go up and down. I don't really feel like there's anyone that you got to get in there tonight with 11 games available to you.
No, Zion's played ridiculously well as of late, but I think the price tag is pretty much accounting for it at this point. Zion is 9,000 on FanDuel, 8,800 on DraftKings. So to me, I think that's a pretty steep price to play for Zion. It's about as expensive as he's been all year. So Zion, not a priority play. Like I said, I think there's probably going to be a lot of guys that are ruled out. And instead of rostering Zion, I'd probably rather get up to the James Harden, Luka Doncic type tier of player. The really big news here is going to be Lonzo Ball. Some games that he's missed recently. It's been a few games in a row now. We've seen Eric Bledsoe has at times played extended minutes. And as always, he's hit or miss. But I do like the GPP upside in Eric Bledsoe. The last couple of games without Lonzo Ball, he scored 17 DraftKings points and 39 DraftKings points. So that is a pretty wide range of outcomes, but he's only 4,800 on DraftKings. So if Lonzo Ball is out, then I would have a little bit of interest in Eric Bledsoe just for the upside in GPPs. If Lonzo Ball's in, there is absolutely no reason to roster him. And then the other guy, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who is at 5,800 now on DraftKings, and on FanDuel, he is at, I think it's about the same price, but I'm just going to bring it up really quickly to be sure. In games that he's also, 5,800 on FanDuel. In games that Lonzo has missed this year, that NWA has started, he's averaging about 33 fantasy points in those games. So with that in mind, I think even at a 5,800 price tag on both sites, he would be worth getting to, assuming he starts at point guard again without Lonzo Ball. But another one where if Lonzo Ball plays, we could ignore Eric Bledsoe, we could ignore Nickeil Alexander-Walker. This isn't really the best team to target in the Pelicans. There's going to be, like I've said, there's going to be a lot of value plays on the slate, and I don't think there's a need to roster guys who are just about fairly priced.
I just appreciate that you called him NWA as opposed to NAW. Just really,
my bad.
No, it takes me to a happy place to start off the day musically. Now I just got it all in my head, and it's awesome. I'm gonna cruise for the next 43 minutes. We're good. We're good.
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with NWA. The other thing too is. The other thing too about it is first of all, this shouldn't matter that much, but it is somewhat early in the morning, and I'm not really totally thinking clearly, and then I'm just kind of reading off some of the stats and names in front of me, and yeah, just brain fart sometimes.
Well, it's funny, like you said it, and I started thinking, man, like I wonder if there's an art, like, is that on purpose? Was he? And I don't mean you, I mean, like, was he named as a tribute to NWA? There's got to be an article about this, and then I said, no, wait. Neil Alexander Walker. No, he just flipped it.
It's just a confluence of letters in my head, and then just me saying them backwards. I don't know.
That was an article I was eager to read. Yeah, his dad grew up a huge Cube fan. Mom loved Dre. They just decided to make it happen. Sticking with that side of that game real quick before we do go to Boston. Eric says Zion's going to smash tonight, but wants to know thoughts on Bledsoe for cheap.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, if Lonzo Ball is out, then Eric Bledsoe is a very, very high variance GPP play, but I would like the upside there. Like I said, his last 2 games, 39 DraftKings points and 17 DraftKings points. So there's a very low floor. There's a decently high ceiling relative to his price. But if Lonzo Ball plays, there'd be no reason to roster Bledsoe.
Raspy says Neil Witt attitude.
Yeah.
And then, all right. So while Tank the Shy Guy here is cruising down the street in his 6'4", let's go over to Boston. And for this one, it's interesting. So Evan Fournier, obviously coming over from the Magic at the trade deadline, 20 points per game, has yet to make his Boston debut. He missed 2 games out due to health and safety protocols. Now he is questionable to play tonight, due obviously to that same reason. We don't know as we sit here whether or not he is going to play, but what I can tell you is that Alex has him projected in, as you've talked about in the past. In the beginning of the day, you got to take a stance one way or the other. Alex, for the sake of projections, has him in tonight. And what that does for Tatum, for Brown, for Walker, for the rest is really nobody is in a good spot on the Boston side in terms of at least fantasy projections. Do you agree with that, or do you is there someone you like here, even a Robert Williams, obviously, because Boston is relatively thin in the middle in terms of guys who make a fantasy impact?
Yeah, I mean, I really, really like Robert Williams. The issue is now he's priced up to the mid 6K range on both FanDuel and DraftKings. So, when Robert Williams was in the 5K range or even in the low 6K range, I thought that he was somebody to roster, but now the price is about appropriate to me. So Robert Williams, I don't think is a very important play for this slate. And the other thing you mentioned there too is now Evan Fournier in the mix. I mean, he's going to have a lesser role with Boston, obviously, than he had with Orlando, because Orlando, especially towards the end of the season there, at least the end of Orlando season, not actually end of the season, but for all intents and purposes, the end of Orlando season, because they sold off everybody because the team sucked. They really went downhill after Markelle Fultz got hurt. But while he was with Orlando this year, Evan Fournier had a 24.7% usage rate. He is not going to have quite that high of a usage with Boston, but still, if we look at who he's taking minutes from in the rotation, like Jeff Teague, who's no longer with the team. We saw Aaron Nesmith play minutes. Semi Ojeleye was playing minutes. These are all fairly low usage players, and now we have somebody in Evan Fournier who's is a pretty substantial usage rate. So when he's on the court, I have to expect he's going to take some shots away from Kemba Walker, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. So I don't know exactly. And also if he's ruled out, then obviously none of this is relevant anyway. But
yeah, suddenly some of these guys are going to be in much better spots.
But as it stands now, I also think he's probably more likely to play than sit. And if that's the case, I kind of want to see how he integrates into the offense, what his role is going to be, and how these other guys fit around him before I really know what the fair outlook is for the Boston Celtics players, especially the core guys like Tatum and Brown, who are still fairly expensive. The other thing, too, is it's an 11-game slate. There's a whole bunch of choices. I highly doubt that Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown, based on their salaries, I don't think it's all that likely one of them score, 60 fantasy points and break the slate. So I'm fine with rostering other guys, seeing how the Celtics situation shakes out. And then going forward, we could start to determine okay, this is how we should view these players fairly now that we have this new look Celtics team.
Another game on the way. First, want to remind you about something I mentioned earlier. That is the Awesemo Podcast Network. If you are not watching the Awesemo shows on YouTube, shame on you. They are available to you at all times. They get archived. They're there. They live. But if you are more comfortable with the podcast setting, that's okay, because almost all of our Awesemo YouTube shows are available through the Awesemo Podcast Network. We've got a podcast for every sport available on every single major platform. So head on over to awesemo.com/podcast. Check out the very latest there. Just leave a 5-star rating and review on one of our podcasts with your Twitter handle or email address, and you'll be eligible to win a free week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Okay, one winner will be awarded every single Friday. Reviews eligible to win for up to a year. So our team, will keep these on file, check them out, and who knows, it could be your day. So best of luck to you. And while you're there, while you're hanging out on the Awesemo YouTube page, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. We're sitting just over 50 likes, right around 400 people watching. Think we can do better in both those categories. Tell your friends and family, join us, and of course, hit that like button. Let's make one big push to 100. Really appreciate that. Next up, Minnesota and Brooklyn here, and we begin on the Minnesota side. Karl Anthony Towns. Mentioned him earlier, obviously. He's in an okay spot, 5x projected value right now, at least on DraftKings, for right around 50 points. And then after that, Anthony Edwards, Malik Beasley, Ricky Rubio. Yeah, I mean, you can pay down, but nobody, I don't know. I don't feel like anyone is really in a great spot here in this game, or at least on this side of this game.
Yeah, I like Towns. If I had to pay up for a center option, Cat would definitely be the guy that I go to. He's been playing very well as of late. If we look at his last, 6 or 7 games, his usage rate is way up, 27%, 39%, 30%, 38%. One game with 23%. That was a blowout against the Suns for that 34%, 33%. So Towns is getting a lot more shot attempts as of late. I think that makes sense. That is how the Timberwolves should be running their offense. Also a positive matchup against the Nets, who, for as great as they've been on offense, not as much on defense. The blowout is going to be a little bit of riskier with Kyrie Irving coming back. The Nets are favored by 12 points, but this game is a 241-point total. The next highest is 233.5, that Pacers-Wizards game. So I mean, we're talking about a game that is a total 8 points higher than any other game on the slate. So it's definitely one I think we want to get some exposure to. With Malik Beasley back in the mix, that takes away from Ricky Rubio. That's going to take away from Anthony Edwards in terms of both his usage a little bit and probably a couple less minutes going forward for Anthony Edwards. But Karl Anthony Towns, I don't think his usage is going anywhere. So Towns, I think, is a pretty strong pay-up option as the slate looks right now. Just $10,000 on FanDuel, $9,900 on DraftKings. And I think he probably should be priced with the most expensive options on the slate, a la, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, Luka Doncic. I think that Towns is right about in that tier of fantasy player.
For Brooklyn, there are a lot of people in the chat very excited about Kyrie Irving's return. I know you mentioned earlier after a little family forced absence here. So James Harden coming off the 44-point real game. That's 44 real points. Never mind what he did fantasy-wise, obviously. But with Irving in the mix, Harden, still has the potential to go off. Hell, they could both go off. But like you said, blowout potential as well. It's possible neither of these guys really does much more than hit their expectation of between 40 and 55 points, depending on which guy you're talking about here. What do you expect from these top stars? And is there anyone else for Brooklyn that you like tonight? To me, it doesn't look like anyone's in a great value opportunity.
Yeah, pay up for Harden. But now Kyrie coming back, he's 9,600 on FanDuel, 9,800 on DraftKings. Mm-hmm. That is as expensive we've seen Kyrie all year. So like I said, the Nets are expected to score a crazy amount of points today. This game has a 241-point total, and the Nets are 12-point favorites. But I still do wonder, Kyrie now hasn't played a game in a week. I don't know exactly why he was away from the team. Might have been a death in the family. Might have been somebody was sick, something along those lines. But, maybe his conditioning isn't up to par. And maybe instead of him playing his normal 35, 36 minutes, maybe they give Kyrie Irving 32 minutes. And at his current price point, that is going to limit him a little bit. And then looking at some of these other guys on the Nets, I really like Nick Claxton. I actually think he's the best center on the Nets. But the reality is they have DeAndre Jordan in the mix. They have Blake Griffin in the mix. Jeff Green is going to play center minutes. LaMarcus Aldridge is on the team, but he's not going to make his debut today. But there's so many guys there that it's hard for me to reliably say that Nick Claxton gets the minutes that I think he should be getting. So, something else I thought was funny is everybody's making such a big deal out of the Nets signing Blake Griffin and LaMarcus Aldridge. And to me, that's almost a negative for the team because I think Claxton's better than both these guys. And it just means that he's one of their best big men, or I think the best big men on the team. And he's just going to play less minutes now because they've signed these kind of older, washed up guys who are going to take his playing time away. So
you didn't know it's 2015 right now?
No, I apparently nobody on Twitter knows either because there was the Nets ruined the NBA by signing, some washed up big men that haven't been good in years. But So like I would like Nick Claxton to play and be somebody I would want to roster in DFS, but we look at the signings the Nets have made. It seems that they don't value Nick Claxton as much as I do. So therefore I can't expect him to play big minutes. Like I said, Kyrie Irving a little bit too expensive. So James Harden is the way that I want to get exposure to the Nets, and how much exposure I get to him is going to depend on how much value opens up on the slate.
You can get access to all the great Awesemo Plus tools and content from nearly every DFS sport available out there with an Awesemo Plus weekly pass. It's $29.95, not even $30 a week, folks. Includes full access to all the premium content and tools on Awesemo.com, including, of course, player projections, ownership projections, our premium Slack channel, our new March Madness package with college basketball DFS projections for every single slate. We're on to the Elite Eight there. That begins tonight. If you're only looking to play NBA, that's perfectly fine. You can sign up now for our Awesemo Plus NBA weekly package. It is just $16.95 again per week. Stop guessing, start winning, and join Awesemo Plus today. It's very much appreciated. Hit the like as you watch along on YouTube. Almost at 75. Appreciate you. And hello to all of you in the chat. James says, yeah, Claxton's a favorite of mine, and adds the old SMH, shaking my head. So let's go to the next one. Heat and the Knicks. You got, can I say your Knicks? Is that fair? Or at least you're in the area.
Yeah, I'm in the area, but I don't really like claim fandom to any team.
All right. Well, they won their last few, so we'll try and keep the momentum going. But first for Miami here. You might argue, Greg, that with, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero, and, obviously Duncan Robinson, a lot of names we're used to talking about here for the Heat, might be Goran Dragic, who's actually in the best spot. He is projected for north of 5x value. He is, clearly a pay down option, $5,400 on DK, right around 30 projected points, pretty close to it. Who do you like on, for the Heat?
Yeah, nobody. So, I mean,
okay.
I just talked about how the Nets Timberwolves game had the highest total on the slate by far. Now we get to the other New York team and the Knicks, who just play at, we were talking about 2015. Tibbs is still running his team. I've said this a bunch of times, 2005, where they played at a really slow pace. So the total for the Knicks game is 206.5. The next lowest total is Toronto, Detroit at 216.5. So we're talking about a game that's a full 10 points lower total than any other game on the slate. There's not going to be a whole lot of possessions in this game. That's going to really cap upside. Everybody's healthy now. That hasn't been a case that we've seen for a while. Nemanja Bjelica, he's expected to make his debut for the Heat, so that's going to muddle up some of the front court minutes. Then Goran Dragic, he's missed time recently. He's probable to play. Kendrick Nunn is out with an ankle injury, but I'm not sure that's going to matter all that much, just because they have all these other guys like Gabe Vincent, Max Strus they could give some minutes to. So there's nobody on the Heat that I want to get to in a game against the Knicks that has such a low total. The Knicks have been just such a brutal matchup for DFS this year because they have a top 5 defense in the NBA and they just play at such a ridiculously slow pace.
So that in mind, going to the Knicks side of things, nobody, right? This is just a game that you're staying away from in general. Obviously, we could talk about Julius Randle being projected for almost 50 points, still sub 5x value. And then there's nobody is really even in as good a spot as he is, unless you want to pay way down to like Elfrid Payton.
Well, Julius Randle is questionable. Reggie Bullock is questionable. So as it stands now, if these guys are in, there's nobody I'd want to roster from the Knicks. But if Randle's out, then I think we could look at what happened in the Knicks last game and pull up some of the usage and minutes from that game and start to try to dissect what we think could happen in a game where if Randle isn't able to play. We saw last game, Alec Burks ended up playing 40 minutes. RJ Barrett played 38 minutes. Nerlens Noel had to play 31 minutes because not only was Randle out, but Mitchell Robinson's also out. He ended up breaking his foot last game. I assume he's going to be out for the rest of the season. So if Randle's out, then I think Nerlens Noel at center wouldn't be a bad option. And then beyond that, I think it would be Alec Burks and RJ Barrett, considering they both played 40 minutes last game. And Barrett also, not only did he play 38 minutes, for Barrett, but 31% usage rate. So really substantial role for him. So if Randle's in, then I think this is probably going to be a team that I mostly want to stay away from. But if Randle's out, then RJ Barrett, Alec Burks, and Nerlens Noel would all be guys that I want to get to.
Producer Jordan, who is donning his Cleveland baseball team hat today, wants everyone to know that you've got a Julius Randle jersey just hanging up somewhere in that room. We just can't see it right now.
I don't. Although, what do I have in here? I do have like a lot of Yankees stuff in here. It's just stuff I had forever. But Yeah, no Knicks stuff though. That is guaranteed.
So you're not claiming no fandom of the Yankees then?
No, I mean, I was when I was a kid, but not anymore. I just still have this stuff, and I want to have something up on the wall.
There you go. Some fresh decor. Let's go Toronto and Detroit. We're halfway home on this show and a bunch of games left to go. So Kyle Lowry, who didn't play yesterday, is expected back tonight. So he is in a good spot, actually, projected for right around 40 points. That's fantasy points, clearly. 5.3 is his points per dollar, his value. Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet. It just kind of becomes a point with these three, as it often is who, if anyone, do you want to roster? They're all arguably in good spots tonight. So who stands out to you?
Yeah, well, I mean, injury report, Kyle Lowry is questionable, Paul Watson's questionable, Jalen Harris is questionable, Patrick McCaw is questionable, DeAndre Bembry is questionable. I read off all those names. The only one that matters is Kyle Lowry, though. Him being questionable matters for the slate. Can't say that guys like Jalen Harris and Patrick McCaw being questionable do, but yeah, the Raptors are pretty banged up. They have an extensive injury report. They do a favorable matchup against the Pistons. It is also the tail end of a back-to-back, so maybe fatigue will be a slight issue. If Kyle Lowry's in, I think that takes away value from everybody, but if Lowry's out, Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam are two guys that I would want to get to. I'm still not sure really what to make of Gary Trent Jr. and what his role is going to be with the Raptors going forward. But definitely if Lowry's out, Siakam and VanVleet, play them. If Lowry's in, then I'm probably not going to have interest in Toronto. I would just look elsewhere, wherever there is pricing value on a slate that's 11 games with a whole bunch of players to choose from.
So for Detroit then, and looking at the chat here, David says, no fandom. That's the way to be as a sports bettor. But Steven says, Greg has become an emotionless DFS data robot.
Yeah, well, it's not even emotion. Well, is it really emotionless? Because I care whether my individual players do
well,
but like
lineups.
But that's the other thing too, is I don't have biases, and I just don't care about some, because you're not even rooting for anything other than a piece of cloth, right? Because there could be a player who you'd be like, oh, I love X player because he's on my favorite team, but you don't really care if he switches teams the next year. But I mean, look, I just root for whoever I've got money on for.
Let's really fall in love with the guy, I mean, there's.
No, not me. That's not the way I go. Yeah, not me. But I mean, I'm very committed to my DFS teams for the night and whichever players I'm invested in. But I mean, there'll never be a part. So you're obviously, you cover the Celtics and they're very ingrained in your life, but for you, does it become any sort of conflicting interest? Like, let's say you could make potentially a bunch of money in DFS if a player does well against the Celtics. What is your rooting interest become then?
Yeah, I'll root for that player to do well in a Celtics win.
Okay. What if the options are that guy has the ball in his hands, down one?
Yeah, game-winning shot.
Down one, game-winning shot. And it's also the difference in you winning in DFS for the night or not. What's your rooting interest?
Yeah, I mean, it becomes, I think, sometimes a different debate internally if we're talking about like the one of 82 in a normal year regular season versus like game 7 of a finals or something like that. Obviously in the regular season, whatever, like take the L, and win your money. That's where my head would be. It's where anyone's head would be. Unless you are just the most devout of sports fans, but to that one cause, to that one team, you start to get into like a championship is on the line or something like that. There are times that I've rooted against the financial outcome just to see the team win, but it's not like I've been in position to win tens of thousands of dollars either.
Well, one day you're going to be in that situation, and your rooting interests are going to change.
You're going to think back to this conversation and wonder where it all went wrong. What else do we have here in the chat? El Negro Loco, by the way, says, I advise everyone to be ready to late swap tonight. This slate is going to get flipped on its head pre and post lock. You generally agree with that? This is going to be a big late swap night.
Yeah, I mean, when there's this, number one, whenever there are 11 games on a slate, that's always going to be an issue. And then we already know this many guys are questionable. And then also, I think we're at a point in the year it's about 7 weeks left in the NBA season at this point. This is already where things start to get a little bit crazy in terms of injuries and late swaps. The other thing also is the way the NBA set up their schedule this year to make a condensed schedule to try to fit in 72 games. It has become a nightmare for injuries at this point in the season. Just it's too much travel. It's too many games. It's too many back-to-backs. And it was always going to be a tall task for players to get in, to stay healthy and not get injured at this point of the season. And that's what we're seeing. I think a lot of it has to do with the schedule the NBA set up.
This is to that end. I am so I'm a huge NBA fan. I mean, not just like, hey, I do the show. I love the NBA. I'm often watching the NBA. The DFS component of it for me, I'm like counting down the days until the season is over, or at least the regular season is over, just because this is the first time that I've ever gone after the whole, play virtually every single day for DraftKings to get the 25,000 crowns. And it is freaking exhausting to be on, unless you just want to like set it and forget it and accept you're not going to do well if you're not going to dive into late swaps and all that stuff. But if you actually want to stay on top of it and do well and not lose money, playing every single day, like the off season is going to be a welcome break when that rolls around.
Yeah, well, I mean, the All-Star break was a good time off. That wasn't even that long ago, but yeah, the last stretch of the NBA season is it is daunting.
Yeah, it's wild. All right, finishing up this game, we haven't done Detroit yet. So Jeremy Grant is in a good spot. Talking about value earlier, value that we actually know about right now. If you want to believe that Saban Lee is a guy you want to put in there, he's projected for almost 7x value, $3,800 on DraftKings, projected for right around 25 fantasy points. Then, of course, between them, you got Mason Plumlee, Sadiq Bey, guys like that. But for Grant, for one end of the spectrum, Lee on the other, how do you feel about these guys?
Yeah, so Saban Lee started last game. Rodney McGruder, he's doubtful to play tonight for the Pistons. Dennis Smith Jr., he hasn't played in like a couple weeks or something like that. He is ruled out in advance of tonight's slate. So Saban Lee started last game, played 24 minutes, scored 25 DraftKings points for the year. Saban Lee is scoring 13 DraftKings points per game in 15 minutes. So he's not the best points per minute fantasy producer in the world, but if he's going to play 25 minutes, then he's going to end up being projected in the neighborhood of 20 to 25 DraftKings points for me. And in that case, at least as of now, he looks like a viable value option, one of the better ones as it stands at 10:39 a.m. Eastern time. Now, with that said, I'm almost positive there's going to be better value plays that open up as the day goes on, and then Saban Lee is not going to become a priority play for me. But if there is some situation where everybody who's questionable on the slate right now ends up being ruled active, then yes, Saban Lee will be one of the top value plays on the slate. As of right now, Saban Lee, yeah, definitely good on a points per dollar basis. His upside, I think, is a little bit capped just because he started last game and only played 24 and a half minutes. There's a whole bunch of guys on the Pistons that are going to get minutes, especially in the backcourt, even with Dennis Smith Jr. and Rodney McGruder out. Frank Jackson's going to play minutes. Corey Joseph, Wayne Ellington, Josh Jackson, Hamidou Diallo. So it's a bunch of guys that are in the mix to get minutes, and that's probably why we don't see Saban Lee play somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 32 minutes. But if other value plays don't open up, then yes, Saban Lee at 3,800 on DraftKings, 3,700 on FanDuel. He is a good value play. I have a feeling that there's going to be like 5 or 6 guys that I'm going to prioritize ahead of him, in like 7 hours.
So on the subject of this slate getting flipped on its head a little bit later on, you want to follow the right people and places in order to know what is going on, so you're not following every single team account and beat writer and all that stuff. Simply stay up to date with the latest NBA DFS news with the Awesemo NBA Twitter handle. It's at Awesemo NBA, where our guy News God, who again, El Negro Loco, hanging out in the chat, will be delivering the latest on injuries, starting lineups, minutes limits, whatever it is, more before daily, every single day, before lock and after lock, for that matter, for games that start a little bit later on. Make sure you get all the latest information that you need. Go to at Awesemo NBA on Twitter, give a follow, or of course you can check out El Negro Loco on Twitter, and that is News God's Twitter handle, at NewsGod, NEWZGOD_DFS. Be sure to also catch today's deep dive with Bearded Adam. Ship My Money, free this season. It's a must read if you are playing NBA DFS. Comes out a little bit later on in the day, closer to lock, when some of this stuff has come out, and you can get great insights on every single game, both sides, detailed insights that you want to make sure you are aware of, in addition to some of the great programming like this show and the ones that come up a little bit later on in the day. So let's keep going. We've got the Grizzlies and Rockets. So for Memphis, Jonas Valanciunas, John Morant, Kyle Anderson, all in good spots. You could pay down. Justice Winslow is in a good spot as well. Probably stay away from Dylan Brooks, Brandon Clark, Grayson Allen, guys like that tonight. But how do you feel about it?
Yeah, so in general, Memphis has been a team where the minutes are really hard to nail down outside of the core guys. So John Morant is probably going to play 33 to 35 minutes. Jonas Valanciunas probably plays, well, actually, Jonas Valanciunas' minutes are a little harder to figure out also. Sometimes he plays 24 minutes, but at least he's the upside to play over 30. generally everybody else on the team, the minutes are spread pretty thin. So on a big slate, there's nobody else that I'm really dying to get to. It's a really favorable matchup against Houston. The Rockets have been terrible for the last like 2 months now. So Valanciunas, I definitely think has upside. The minutes are definitely going to be a little bit unpredictable. Ja Morant, at least we know that he has stable minutes. It's a positive matchup against Houston. So for GPP purposes, I think Morant and Valanciunas are both guys to roster, like 5% of lineups or something like that, but nothing really crazy. And then I rarely get to anything else from Memphis.
For Houston, is it kind of Christian Wood and everybody else? I know there's John Wall, Porter, Tate, House, guys like that. But is it mainly Christian Wood for you, if anybody?
Well, Christian Wood is questionable to play, and it's weird. I don't really know what to expect here because in terms of whether what his actual odds are of playing today, because Christian Wood missed the Rockets last game with what was called a knee injury. He's also dealt with an ankle injury. Then they've said his knee's bothering him. They've also said that now he's sick. So he's dealing with an illness. He's questionable. So it seems like there's a whole bunch of stuff going on with Christian Wood.
He's sick of playing for Houston like everybody else.
Yeah. I mean, Houston, like Victor Oladipo, they traded him for nothing. So the final outcome of the Harden trade, they traded Harden to basically get back Oladipo, and they jumped Oladipo for absolutely nothing. Right. DeMarcus Cousins signed with them in the offseason. He was like, no, I'd rather just not play basketball. So he's he's gone. What I think is key here, though, is if Christian Wood is out, Kelly Olynyk started in his place last game. He only played 25 minutes. It was also a very rare blowout win for the Houston Rockets. He ended up playing 25 minutes in the start. Probably would have been more minutes if it wasn't for that. Ended up scoring 34 and a half DraftKings points. So Kelly Olynyk, who is still only 4,400 on DraftKings, he's 5,200 on FanDuel. If he draws another start after what we saw from him last game, Kelly Olynyk becomes one of the top value plays on the slate. So somebody else, when we talked about a Saban Lee from the game before, and I said there's probably going to be value plays that open up that are better than him, Kelly Olynyk would certainly be one of those guys. So if Christian Wood is out, then Kelly Olynyk, definitely somebody to get to. If Christian Wood's in, I still don't know what to make of him. Like, I mean, the price point is favorable to me, but he's dealing with so much stuff right now that I don't know how likely the Rockets are to play him big minutes. So that would be a little bit of an issue. John Wall's played well recently, except his price has gone really up at this point. So the key thing to look for here is going to be whether Christian Wood plays or not. And then I think Kelly Olynyk becomes one of the best plays on the slate if Christian Wood is out.
Still have about 5 games to cover and about 15 minutes to do it. So we go a little more rapid fire here. Dallas and OKC for the Mavericks. Luka Doncic, I don't know if you necessarily want to pay up for him. Kristaps Porzingis is in a pretty good spot and obviously significantly cheaper. Josh Richardson, you could make the case for him. You could pay down Dorian Finney-Smith. There are a variety of options on the Dallas side right now. What do you think about Luka and then obviously filtering down?
Yeah, so I mean, the key thing here is going to be what happens with the other pay up options on the slate. And what I mean by that is Luka right now, to me, is just one of those guys in the high end. Like Russell Westbrook is one of those guys. James Harden is one of those guys. But if Bradley Beal is out, then Westbrook becomes elevated way above Luka Doncic. As of right now, I look at Harden, Doncic, and Westbrook kind of in the same tier. I have Harden right now the most favorable of those, and then Doncic 2, Westbrook 3. But then how much I want to get to each of them, like I said, is going to largely depend on what happens with Bradley Beal and if Westbrook then becomes a much stronger play than those other guys. So Luka right now is somebody who's going to be in my player pool, but not someone I'm going to be like massively overweight to or anything like that. You mentioned Porzingis, and particularly on FanDuel, I think that he is a really strong play. Only 7,900 on FanDuel, 8,100 on DraftKings is a little bit more fair. The other thing to consider also is because of the defensive stats that Porzingis racks up, he's always a little bit more favorable play on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings. So Porzingis at 7,900 on FanDuel, I think is one of the better power forward options. He's also not projected for all that much ownership at this point in the day, project for 15% ownership. I think that should be higher based on what his price point is. So Porzingis on FanDuel is the top play to look at here. And then Luka, a pay up option who's going to be in the mix for me, but not a priority as of now.
OKC, Moses Brown looked like Wilt Chamberlain the other night against Boston. I think 19 first half rebounds. He was absurd. Making the most of the opportunity with Al Horford done for the season, not hurt, just not playing. They've agreed upon that. So you're going to see a lot more of him. He's in a good spot tonight. $6,800 on DK, about 35 fantasy points projected, almost 5.5x value. You could make a case for Isaiah Roby. We do not have SGA. And so, is it really like Brown's the guy here for the Thunder?
Yeah, I actually really like Moses Brown, what we've seen from him this year. So for the season, he's playing 17 minutes per game. He averages 22 DraftKings points. That is just ridiculous per minute production. And now that he's starting, I think the minutes are going to be really substantial as long as he could avoid foul trouble. Last game, he played 33 minutes, scored 50 DraftKings points. Almost all of those came in the first half, though. But so it kind of slowed down the second half. But still, I mean, recent games for Moses Brown, like we said, last game, 50 DraftKings points. The game before, came off the bench, 31 minutes, 45 DraftKings points. Overall for the season as a starter, he is playing 29 minutes per game and averaging 38 DraftKings points. So still priced in the 6K range on both FanDuel and DraftKings. He's somebody that I want to get to. I think that price point is a little bit too cheap based on what we've seen from him so far. Something else, we talked about Robert Williams earlier. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons I'm not all that inclined to get to Robert Williams is because he's in the same exact price range as Moses Brown. And Moses Brown is just not competing with anybody else for stats on this Thunder team. So Moses Brown, I think, is the young center in that price range to get to. I like Moses Brown quite a bit.
Folks, baseball, Major League Baseball opening day. It's coming up Thursday, April 1st, and we have a deal for you. Get your first 9 days of Awesemo Plus MLB for only $9 when you use a promo code. It is starting 9. And that is starting with the number 9, okay? Starting, then the number 9. Gives you access to everything we have to offer for MLB DFS, including player projections, ownership projections, top stacks, lineup builder, our premium Slack channel, all the great stuff we often talk about with some of these other sports like NBA. This offer is valid through April 9th, okay? So you got, a week and change to take advantage of it here. Stop guessing, start winning, and join Awesemo Plus MLB today. Again, valid through April 9th. The promo code is starting 9. So making the move here, Sacramento and San Antonio. The Kings, of course, the road team here. Tyrese Halliburton may be in the best spot of anybody on this team in terms of value opportunity and what his salary is. He's a mid-tier guy, $6,100 on DK. Of course, above him, De'Aaron Fox, Rashawn Holmes, Harrison Barnes. But is it Halliburton for you?
I've been pretty high on Halliburton lately, but I think now we've gotten to a point where there's $6,100 on DraftKings, on FanDuel. Halliburton is $5,500. So the $5,500 price point on FanDuel is appealing, but at $6,100 on DraftKings, I don't think he's all that important. It's a little bit cheaper than I think he should be priced, but even so, like I've said before, there's going to be 11 games on there is 11 games on the slate, and there is going to be a bunch of value. So somebody in the mid range who's maybe just slightly underpriced on a slate that's this big, it's hard to prioritize decent value when there's going to be really good to great value in all likelihood. So Halliburton at 6,100, to me, not somebody that's all that important on DraftKings. 5,500 on FanDuel, that's a little bit more of an appealing price point. As for other guys, like Rashawn Holmes is fairly expensive now, and Buddy Hield, Harrison Barnes, Halliburton. The other thing that also kind of impacts some of these wing players is that Delon Wright's on the Kings now, and he is going to be playing at least somewhat of a substantial role going forward, probably playing somewhere in the neighborhood of, like 22 to 26 minutes per game, and that's going to take away from a lot of those other role players for the Kings. De'Aaron Fox is a pay-up option. I've been on him more than most people this year, but once again, this is slate I think is going to set up really well as a stars and scrubs type slate. And for that reason, I don't think I'm going to be very high on Fox because I'd rather be getting up to the guys who are priced a little bit above him.
For the Spurs, DeMar DeRozan, not necessarily in as good a spot, even for a comparable price as DeJounte Murray, at least in terms of Alex's projections here. You could pay down Kelvin Johnson, pay down even further, Patty Mills. Who do you like here?
Yeah, nobody. I think this is a pretty easy team to not really target. The Spurs, we've seen a bunch of games this year where we've wanted to get to them, but this is one of the rare times where mostly everybody's healthy. I mean, Lonnie Walker's out, but it's not like he's somebody who typically plays a massive role. They just signed Gorgie Jang. I'm not sure if he's going to be active tonight or if he is, what kind of role he is going to play. Devin Vassell was out last game. He's expected to return with an ankle injury. So it's probably going to be a pretty deep rotation. And I think the minutes are going to be spread pretty thin. The only guys that I think are guaranteed to play big minutes are Derek White, DeJounte Murray, and DeMar DeRozan, but all of them are pretty significantly priced based on what we normally see from them. So even though it's a really favorable matchup against the Kings, who play one of the fastest pace in the league and have one of the worst defensive efficiencies in the NBA, Once again, there's spots that are better target than the Spurs. So this isn't the team I think we need exposure to.
Cavaliers probably going to run into some trouble with Utah tonight. One would expect. Jazz have won their last 6. Let's start with the Cavs. Colin Sexton's at the top of the heap, projected for almost 5.5x value. As somebody wrote in the chat earlier, what is a Broderick Thomas or Broderick Thomas? See, I think that's the point. We don't really know. He is projected for about 7x value, though, at $3,300, close to the minimum on DK, north of 20 fantasy points projected. Do you like him, this unsung Thomas here?
Yeah, so it's somebody like it's hard to really have strong opinions on Broderick Thomas. I'll bring up his numbers for the other thing also. This is a brutally difficult matchup against the Utah Jazz. He played 31 minutes last game against the Kings. That's a very favorable matchup. He only scored 18 fantasy points in those minutes. So for the year, the limited amount we've seen Broderick Thomas, he plays 10 minutes per game. He averages 8.75 DraftKings points. That's not awful points per minute production, except he's also been doing it in, spurts where he's coming off the bench, generally only playing garbage time. And he plays, like 7 minutes of garbage time and scores like 6 fantasy points. And I think on a points per minute basis, it's a lot easier to be successful in that kind of role when you're playing against backups than it is when all of a sudden you're moved into the starting lineup like we saw last game. Like I said, 31 minutes last game, scores 18 fantasy points. And now we're talking about a matchup where he's going up against a really tough Jazz team. It's hard for me to see there being really too much significant upside in Broderick Thomas. So there's other value plays that I feel like, once again, I'd rather be getting to on this slate because there's going to be other guys that open up. The other thing also, Broderick Thomas right now projected for 50% ownership. At that kind of number, you should still play him in cash games on DraftKings, but as far as value options go, I'd rather roster somebody else than a 50% owned Broderick Thomas in GPPs because I don't think Broderick Thomas ever warrants being 50% owned.
Like we said, we'll see what ownership looks like a little bit later on when more value emerges, obviously. Mike Conley on the Utah side, though, might be the guy who sticks out most, not Mitchell, not Gobert. Is that the case for you?
So one thing that is also a really big concern for me this game, and blowouts, like we've said, are tough to predict. We talk about that a lot on this YouTube channel, but Utah's a 16-point favorite against Cleveland, and 16 points is where we start to get into the neighborhood of blowout is fairly likely in this spot. So 16 points is a really wide spread, and I also think it's a game where even if they get up by 12, 15 points, Cleveland should be able to win pretty handily. So it's hard for me to see Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, Mike Conley, these guys playing 35, 36 minutes. I think these guys are more likely to play under 30 minutes than they are to play over 30 minutes on this slate. So I'm not going to be prioritizing Utah guys just because the spread is so wide.
All right, let's keep going then. Chicago and Golden State, one of the last 2 games we've got going on here. For the Bulls, let us see here. Of course, after all those changes, as we know that they made, adding Vucevic, who's not necessarily in a great spot tonight, nor is Zach LaVine necessarily as compared to Thaddeus Young if you wanted to pay down pretty substantially off of those 2 guys. Is that what you want to do, or do you like one of the upper echelon options here for Chicago?
Yeah, it's still a wait and see for me. I don't know how Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic are ultimately going to end up fitting in together. The first game that Vuce had with the Bulls was an absolute total disaster. They got blown out by the Spurs. They lost by 16 points. Even when he was on the court, Vucevic was much less effective than we normally see from him. He only had a 21.1% usage rate, so that's a little bit of a concern. Zach LaVine, obviously a high usage guard, and I wonder a little bit if Vucevic is just going to see way less usage in Chicago than what he saw when he was with Orlando. And even Zach LaVine himself saw a little bit of a downtick in usage. He only had a 28.8% usage rate in the first game playing alongside Vucevic. So that's a tick lower than we normally see from LaVine. So I do think with these 2 all-stars playing together, that could impact the amount that each of them get shots up going forward. So still a wait and see situation for me, especially because we have so many guys to pay up for on the slate. Like we already mentioned before, James Harden, Luka Doncic, Russell Westbrook. Those are the guys I'm going to be prioritizing spending up for. So Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic, I still want to wait and see what their usage ends up being going forward. My gut feeling, though, is that they're both going to be lower.
What's your outlook on Golden State in lack of clarity right now on Steph Curry, obviously?
I think we need clarity on Steph Curry because he has so much pull on the team. Currently listed as questionable tailbone injury. I think he's probably a little more likely to sit this game than play. He was an unexpected upgrade to questionable on the injury report for this game. He was expected to miss at least a couple more games before returning, but the Warriors are struggling so much without Curry, and they've gotten to a point where they're now 10th in the Western Conference and even only holding a narrow lead on that 10th spot. Pulling up the standings really quick, they have only up one game on the Kings for the 10th spot, only up a game and a half on the Pelicans also. So two teams that are capable of catching them. So they're in pretty big risk of falling out of even the play-in game if Steph Curry misses more time. So I think there's a little bit of panic there. That's why they upgraded him to questionable. It's really hard to draw any kind of conclusions on the Warriors until we find out if Steph Curry's in or out.
Got one more game for you here, and you probably see the Awesemo avatar all over the DFS leaderboards, and for good reason, folks. People are really good who are associated with Awesemo, like you out there. But in addition to that, if you rock our avatar in your DFS profile, you will win a free month of Awesemo Plus when you place within the top 3 of any GPP of 5,000 plus entries. So head on over to awesemo.com/announcements/avatar, or simply Google search Awesemo avatar for the instructions on how to download the image. And we'll be keeping an eye out on that, obviously. So best of luck to you, as we always say. For Milwaukee and the Clippers, first the Bucks. I don't think anybody at the moment, with what we know right now, is in a great spot, unless you want to pay up for Bryn Forbes, or pay down, I should say, for Bryn Forbes. Basically the minimum. But I mean, Giannis, Middleton, Holiday. These guys just at this moment, not guys that you got to get in there, because we don't have the full clarity, especially on Middleton.
Yeah, well, Middleton, these guys were all playing. They've been announced in. So they missed last game, but it was just rest. There was no real serious injury there, I don't think. It was just a game where they're playing against the Knicks. It was a game that was not all that significant for Milwaukee. And they're just like, hey, we're holding everybody out. So Giannis didn't play that game. Middleton didn't play. Holiday didn't play. DiVincenzo didn't play. The ones that remain out, Rudy Skirux, which he doesn't really matter all that much. He's out. PJ Tucker's out. And Bobby Portis is out. But with DiVincenzo, Holiday, Middleton, and Giannis coming back, there's no reason to look at any of the value plays on this team. Giannis, to me, is a pay-up option that's viable, but a low priority one. Middleton, Holiday, I'm not going to be getting to either of those guys. I actually have a decent amount of interest in the Clippers side of the game, though.
Alan King says 500 plus watching, only 100 plus likes. Come on, man. I agree. Let's get to 150. One huge like push before we get out of here. Let's do the other side of this game. Smash that like. Appreciate you. For the Clippers, Leonard, George, Zubac. You can make the case to roster any or all of them. How do you feel?
Yeah, so I like Kawhi Leonard for this slate a good amount relative to what his price is, and that he's not really projected for all that much ownership. Kawhi Leonard, just ownership in the teens, 8,900 on DraftKings. I mean, Kawhi Leonard, there are not very many slates that we get to roster him sub 9K, and he's been fairly good recently. The last 3 games for Kawhi Leonard, 48, 49, and 45 DraftKings points, yet his price keeps dipping. A game against the Bucks, it has a pretty high total, 232, so the third highest total on the slate. We're expecting to be played at a pretty good clip. The other thing, too, that's important when we look at guys like Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, in games that are very important, like you get like marquee matchups, we've seen these guys play bigger minutes. So Kawhi Leonard is somebody who I'd pretty comfortably say is probably going to play in the neighborhood of, 36 minutes tonight. And that kind of minutes for Kawhi Leonard at this depressed price, I think that he's somebody who's going overlooked on the slate. On FanDuel too, he's not quite as cheap as he is on DraftKings, but even 9,600 for Kawhi, I think is a price point getting to. So 8,900 on DK, that is a way, way too cheap of a salary for Kawhi Leonard.
So again, 11 games on the docket tonight. For anyone joining us for the final moments of this program, just to quickly reset, who do you like most here tonight? I don't care the price point, doesn't matter.
Let's see. If I had to roster one player as of now, that would really depend on it would probably be Moses Brown, actually, because that's somebody who also it's not gonna matter who's in or who's out. Like Moses Brown is going to be an important play for me, no matter what some of these other situations end up being.
Here's what we got the rest of the day here on the Awesemo YouTube page. Of course, couple hours away, you got PGA course and player preview. That is at 1 o'clock, actually followed by 2 o'clock. You got the DFS PGA DFS first look. You'll have Jason and Moose Ulrich. Jeff will be with you. NHL strategy show at 3 o'clock with it'll be Jake and Terry, and then 4 o'clock, Greg will return with Eric and Kayla for the tip-off until 4:45. Rolls right into the NBA Deeper Dive with Laffy, Steve, and Bearded Adam, as opposed to me. NBA Live Before Lock at 6 o'clock with Spags and Josh. And then tonight you will have, 9 o'clock. It will be MLB, we're not there yet. NBA Late Slate Live Before Lock with a couple of games, Spags and EMAC. So for Anchor, who wants nothing but EMAC all the time, you will get EMAC tonight for NBA Late Slate Live Before Lock. Make sure you check it out. We appreciate everyone hanging out with us here on this Monday to start off your work week, but definitely start off your Monday with the first show here, other than the process that you had earlier. But let's be honest, who's up that early? That's a show with Josh that you got to catch on demand after the fact. Jordan, our producer, Greg, of course, he's the brains behind the program. Thanks so much, buddy. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, EMAC 2024.
We'll see you guys next time.